Dartmoor is an expanse of highland in Devon. It's composed of granite covered with a thin layer of peaty, boggy soil. Some ponies, cattle and sheep graze here, but the poor acid soil makes it difficult to cultivate, and little grows but coarse grass, heather, bracken and gorse. Granite boulders, some of great size, mark the surface of the moor. The traveller crossing Dartmoor may notice that some of these have been arranged in an artificial formation. Several such formations are found, but the most obvious of these are the great stone rows composed of massive blocks of granite set up in lines. Usually, these stone rows are between 50 and 200 yards in length, although one extends for over 2 miles. The original purpose of these great monuments can only be conjectured, but we know that they were associated with burials, since at one end of the row there's always a cairn of stones or other indication of a grave. Besides the stone rows, many small circles composed of granite boulders can be found on the moors. These are the remains of the circular huts in which people lived back in the Bronze Age. It's so long since they were inhabited, perhaps 3,000 years or so, that all that's left of the circular walls are low ridges. These huts averaged a diameter, but some were 10 feet across. The remains of these primitive dwellings are called hut circles. From the ground, these remains are interesting enough, but seen from the air, a whole new vista is open to us. Prehistoric villages from which the last man vanished thousands of years ago spring to the eye. Many hundreds of these hut circles can be found on Dartmoor. Sometimes a granite wall can be traced on the moors encircling a group of huts. This is called a pound, and was probably built to control the domestic animals. These pounds are of various shapes, but they're always rounded so that there are no corners. Here, 2 schoolboys are excavating a hut circle to see what traces of its former inhabitants can be found. The trained observer discovers buried below the earth which forms the floor of the hut many relics of its former inhabitants, such as cooking stones, which were first heated and then dropped into the pots to warm the contents. This was necessary because the pottery couldn't stand the direct heat of the fire. Pieces of charcoal from the fires and parts of the primitive pottery are also discovered. This party is reconstructing a Bronze Age hut, using, as far as we know, the same materials and methods by which those early inhabitants of Dartmoor built their homes. Large granite boulders and stones form the walls, which are built of a double thickness with earth and smaller stones packed between. The low doorway is crowned with a granite lintel. The roof of the hut is built on a framework of oak timbers, forked at one end to interlock with each other. The other ends of these branches rest firmly on the hut wall. A visit to the woods yields some pliable saplings. These are to strengthen and thicken the roof. They're interlaced and woven into the framework of branches. It's now necessary to make the roof structure wind and weatherproof. This is done by spreading rushes over the frame, or possibly heather or bracken might have been used. On top of this, turves are laid to keep the rushes in place and to make the roof weatherproof. Here's the interior of the hut as it appears when complete. The home of the Bronze Age man, as it might have looked to some hunter returning from a forage over the moors. A party of children look over the hut, taking note of its shape and measurements. Back at school, they start to build a model, using plasticine to fix in place small pieces of granite which form the walls. Moss and twigs are gathered to make the roof, and to complete the effect, a Bronze Age family and their belongings are made to scale from modelling clay. The roof is constructed in the same way as in the full-size hut, and straw is used to simulate the rushes. Moss is glued in place to imitate the turf covering. One section of the roof is left open to show the hut interior. Once complete, the hut is furnished with skins, a hearthstone and fire, and the crude cooking pots which were to be found in the original. This, then, gives us a picture of the Bronze Age hut dwellers of Dartmoor who lived on the moor 2,000 or 3,000 years ago.